And that is that in his deer body, in his next life, instead of associating with other deers, he was aware of his fall down, and he became conscious of that, and therefore he went around the sages and saints, and he would listen to their discourse. And because of that, he gave up that deer. After giving that deer body, he came back to a human body, and again he finished his life as a great personality named Jud Bharat. But this example is used here to show that how one should be very, very aware of the fact that if we want to perfect our life in Krishna consciousness, it's a culmination of activities throughout the whole life. It's not something that we just, at the time of death, as explained here. And I'll read a little bit more of the purport. If in one's present life one lives in the mode of goodness, in other words, those qualities that are conducive to devotional service, that are considered the qualities of piety and morality, and one always thinks of Krishna, it is possible for one to remember Krishna at the end of life. Now, Prabhupada uses the word always. We hear that many times in Prabhupada's statement. He doesn't say think of Krishna, he says Satatam Kirtayantamam, always remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's a constant cultivation, and as we cultivate that, and Krishna will explain here in one of the verses, what does that mean in a practical sense? That will help one to be transferred to the transcendental nature of Krishna. If one is transcendentally absorbed in Krishna's service, then in his next body he will be transcendental, not material. Therefore, the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare, is the best for successfully changing one's state of being at the end of one's life. So that's what we do. We practice chanting Hare Krishna. It's more than just a practice, it's a way of devotion, but it's very direct, and it's the most simplified form of developing the consciousness to Krishna, to practice remembering Krishna by chanting his holy name. And then Krishna goes, and he gives a more, what we say, inclusive statement to follow those statements about remembering him. He said, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna. At the same time, carry out your prescribed duties of fighting. So here's the point. We have so many duties in life. We have duties to take care of the family. We have duties in order to take care of the family by performing a certain occupation, which gives us pecuniary, stability. All that is required in Grihastha life, those who live in family. And so that has to go on. But if that becomes the main activity in our life, the main in the sense that we're finding the most happiness and success in life by how much we can raise the family and how much we can, become successful in our occupation, then we're missing the actual understanding. So this is called, in a very, in the terminology, we have to align our consciousness that with whatever activities we perform, it is meant to as a service to the Supreme Lord. So these things are subsidiary, or what we might say, supportive of our golden life, which is to become Krishna conscious. So in order to make that happen, we have to see and perform activities which are conducive to remembering Krishna. Now that's difficult. It takes practice. There are many devotees we find who are working in occupations, but there are formulas that one can adopt in order to, what we say, facilitate more and more remembrance of Krishna and become less and less attached to the results of the activities we perform in order to maintain ourselves in this material world like that. When we understand, I am not this body, That's the basic principle of understanding. Then we understand, well, then I have to act for the body, but I'm not the body, so it's not the most important thing in my life. The most important thing in my life is to become Krishna conscious. That is the goal of life. Taktva deham purna janmani naitimam eti sarjuna. Krishna says that if you remember me at the time of death and you understand my nature as being transcendental, then you can return to me. So the whole process of Krishna consciousness is to give us the information on what is the nature of Krishna, how he performs his activities, and what is our relationship to him. So that can be understood through both what is called sadhana. Sadhana means to hear and chant the glories of the Lord, and to engage in practical service to the Lord. All these helps to formulate our consciousness and build that consciousness then when that time comes. And we should not be afraid of death, because death is a part of life. Fear of death comes when one is attached to material life. If we want to be free from death, we have to be attached to Krishna. Then that attachment will free us from the fear of death, because we know I'm serving Krishna now, and this is my goal, to become Krishna conscious. Therefore, when I leave this body, I'll do the same thing. Prabhupada uses an example of a wheat husking machine. He calls it a deki. That's the Hindi term for wheat husker. If you have it here in the earthly realm of existence, what does it do? It husks wheat. If you take the same machine and you bring it to the higher planets, what does it do? It does the same thing. It husks wheat. So wherever devotee is, does the same thing. Engages in devotional service to the Lord, no matter what realm of existence we are. So when we begin to think like that, then death is just a transition to a better state of existence, or ultimately, if we have reached the stage of pure love for Krishna, then taktva deham purna janmani, we don't come back anywhere to any realm of material existence. We attain, as Krishna says here, my nature, and then you can associate with Krishna directly. And that is the goal of life, ultimately. That's the ultimate principle of happiness. And as Srila Prabhupada would say, everyone is looking for happiness, everyone's looking for Krishna. Because he represents that happiness everyone is looking for. So this is the process of Krishna consciousness. So to remember that we have to leave this world is an important part of achieving the results of leaving the world. What does that mean? Well, it means that we should understand that life is short, comparatively speaking, especially in this age of Kali. We don't live long. And so preparing ourselves for death also means to remember that this feature of death can happen at any moment. I was giving a class on this same subject from the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita in New Jersey. I must have been about 6 or 7, maybe even longer than that, in the Central Jersey Temple. And there was about 150 people in the class. It was a full Sunday feast program. And I was sitting there talking about the difference between the body and the soul, and the importance of understanding ourselves as different from the body. And speaking a little bit about the final moment of our life, death. And while I'm going on, I could see not too many people were really paying attention. And so but I continued to go on, and then Krishna helped. He helped. One man in the back was sitting way in the back. He falls off his chair and collapses on the floor, right in the middle of my lecture. Fortunately, there was a firehouse next door. And so they called the firemen. They came in with their medics, and they immediately took him away. And after that, my class, full attention. No problem. I didn't even have to say anything. They were just ready for whatever I was. But fortunately, he was diabetic, so his diabetes went really high, so he lost consciousness. Fortunately, the man was okay. But Krishna wanted to make the whole class a little more interesting. A little, little example of what's happening on philosophically. So this can happen at any time. I'll tell you a story. It's not a very pleasant story, but it's a real story. Devotees in Chaupadi in India were preaching to one college, J.J. Medical College, and they had developed a program for the medical students in the college. And so they were going regularly, giving, little satsangs, and many of the students were coming. So this was going on for some time throughout the whole semester, and many of them were coming regularly. So at one point towards the end, maybe not so much towards the end, but maybe halfway through the semester, one of the boys who was coming regular said to his fellow students, I like this Hare Krishna, but I want to graduate as the top of my class. So I'm not coming to the classes anymore. I'm going to just absorb myself in my studies. But I'll be back. After I graduate, I'll be back. So his friend said, okay, fine, but now you promised you'll come back. Yes, okay. So he stopped coming, and then he absorbed himself in studies, and he became the #1 student in the entire university, graduated with topmost honors, the best of all students. So then his friend said, well, tonight the devotees are coming. He said, yeah, I know, but there's a party. It's in my honor. So I'm going to the party. And the students were trying to dissuade him, come on, the devotees are coming. He said, no, I'm going to the party. So he went to the party, and they were dancing in the party. And while he was dancing, he collapsed, he had a heart attack, and he died right on the spot, 23 years old. This was an actual, in fact, I was there when it was happening around that time. No medical history of any, what we say, disease. He had become the top medical student in the school. But that's life, or that's how life can. So the point was, and this is in line with Prahlad Maharaja's stories, a statement to his young students where he said, death means just before you die. Death means, they were saying to Prahlad, when we get old, we'll get serious about this Hare Krishna. And right now, we want to play. So we're young. He said, old means just before you die. No one knows that moment. So this is not about scaring anyone, but it's coming to the reality of how the material energy works. Jai Sri Sri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani Gornitai Ki Jai. So the Shastras encourage, actually it's not so much the Shastras, the Niti Shastras, it says that if you want to be successful in material life, don't think about death. Because you can't really get enthusiastic for your plans. The enthusiasm is somewhat dissipated when if you're thinking about, I got all these plans for material happiness, but so forget about it. Therefore, your enthusiasm will be uninterrupted. But then again, the contrary is also mentioned. If you want to be successful in spiritual life, then that has to be foremost in one's consciousness. One has to remember that this life is about preparing for our next life to go back home, back to Godhead. So, and Krishna explains here, in the next verse, he said, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna. At the same time, carry out your prescribed duties of fighting with your activities dedicated to me, and your mind and intelligence fixed on me. You will attain me, and he goes on to say, without doubt. In other words, he assures that if we perform our activities for the pleasure of the Lord and think of him, at least cultivate this mood of thinking of Krishna, then we are actually formulating a consciousness that will be that consciousness that will appear at the time of death, like that. So this is very important. And then another statement, this was a statement made by someone in the Sri Sampradaya, I don't have any reference other than that, which says that two things you should always remember and two things you should always forget. And the two things you should always forget, you should forget all the good things that people have done for you. Haribol. Because it helps one, or it helps one to develop, so one may develop a sense of pride. So one should forget that. It's not so important. And we also understand from scriptures that says that ultimately whatever you can do, at least beneficially, is also the grace of the Lord. So actually the Lord is the one that gives the mercy, provides the intelligence, sets the situation, and then you perform the activity and you get the credit. That's something that's mentioned in Gita. And the other thing you should also forget, you should forget all the bad things people have done to you. And that makes you happy. Because if you remember these things, this is called forgiveness, a sense of pridelessness, which helps one to actually live life happily. Okay, so something happened. All right, so it's not so important. I remember I was giving a lecture to a group of people in Bhaktivedanta Manor who had came from Manchester, England. They had come to the manor for a particular tour. So part of that program was for me to give a lecture on Vaishnav Seva. So I was talking about the importance of serving Vaishnava. So that topic came up. And at the end, one lady came up to me and she said, I didn't want to ask this question in public, but Maharaj, I have this problem with this one lady. She did something to me and I can't forgive her. I'm trying to forgive her, but I can't forgive her. So my question to her was, well, how long ago was that? And she said 25 years ago. I almost fell off my ISKCON, It wasn't a very far way down, but still I almost fell. And I didn't know what to say. All I could say was, how can you do that? How can you maintain that so-called grudge for so many years? So it's very, if you're carrying something like that, one cannot really go deeper into any aspect of life because that becomes something that bothers one's consciousness. So learning how to forgive. Learning how to forgive. And then the two things you should always remember that the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and one should always remember that death can happen at any time. So for a devotee, death is the gateway to eternal life. It's not simply something that one should be fearful about, but one should be ready for. By preparing, as Krishna says, to perform your prescribed duties by remembering me at all times. And then if you do that at the time of death, taktva deham purna janmani naitimam iti surjam, you'll return to me in devotion. So Krishna makes two statements along with the summation of that statement in these three verses. The importance of developing a consciousness of Krishna at the time of death. Okay, so stop there. Of course, there's two verses also in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Maharaj Parikshit asks Sukadeva Goswami, well, what is the duty of a man about to die? And then Maharaj Parikshit, Sukadeva Goswami answers, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smarnam. To hear, to chant, and to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that prepares one. So that's our activities at devotional service, to more and more develop our consciousness of Krishna by hearing about Krishna. Krishna is all attractive. His qualities, his names, his forms, his pastimes are by nature very attractive. And as we develop that hearing process, the attraction process works at the same time. And the more we become attracted to Krishna, the more we become free from the suffering and anxieties that come in by way of living in this material world. Even the present situation that we're in seems to be causing people some fear. The one who hears and chants the glories of the Lord and remembers Krishna, there's no fear. Because they know, simply by taking shelter of the Lord, I am protected. I am free from the effects of the material energy. And that's Krishna's promise. So this is something we should think about. It's one of the most important parts of our Krishna consciousness, preparing for that journey back home, back to God. Okay, thank you very much, Hare Krishna. Should we have questions? And do we have time for questions? Anyone want to ask questions? Or if you have a question on some other topic related to Krishna consciousness? Yeah, whatever you think is best.
You want to do that, or did you want me to say some things?
Yeah, then we can field the questions.
So what should we do? Okay. Then we'll take some questions. Okay. I want to pause just for a moment and give a little more introduction about Gopal Prabhu, who is, you want to stand up and take your mask off if we can see you? He's based in Parsnipadi, where they're building a beautiful temple, many of you know. And he is the regional secretary, recently appointed for this temple, this area. So he works to assist me as the governing body commissioner and help Anasuya and the board of directors trying to help the temple. So this is actually his first visit in that capacity. And later he will become what's called, there's some restructuring going on in terms of ISKCON globally. So there's a position called zonal supervisor. So he'll soon be that. That's something that's officially established by the governing body commission. But in the meantime, just to make him feel embarrassed, we can have him stand there for a couple hours just so everybody can kind of stare at him and get an idea who he is. And I think that's a pretty good plan. Jai, now it's certified. Anyway, he'll be coming here a few times a year, and he's on the board of directors, so he'll be participating. So everybody please say some prayers for Managopal can help provide some nice leadership here. So thank you. Hare Krishna. He's also the co-director of communications for North America, and he has a full-time job. He's got a son in college at Michigan State University, and like many people in this kind, he's a very busy guy. But I've heard it said in the past sometimes, if you want to get something done, find someone who's already busy, because they'll figure out a way to do it. If you don't want it done, find somebody who's, says they have to finish their rounds or something else, because they'll do that all day long. So he's one of those very active people. I'll just add also first I just want to say it's a real pleasure to come back here. So Maharaj was telling me he was in Croatia for a long time, and then Slovenia, and this is his first trip to America since the COVID, I believe.
I went to London for 5 weeks, then here.
First time here. Yeah, so it's similar for me. Based in Washington, D.C., it's the first time I've been here. I went to St. Louis and Chicago a couple times, but it's nice to be here. Again, it feels kind of a little liberating to be able to travel again. And it's very inspiring to see, this temple. I'd forgotten how beautiful this is inside. Outside you kind of drive by, and it's an okay building. It's a nice brick building. They don't build buildings the way they did when they built this one. It's actually nicely built. But when you walk in, you really get it's an oasis of really Vaishnava culture. It's really so beautiful. And every time I come, there's always a few things that are improved. I know the altar's been nicely improved. And I told Anasuya, I went in the back, Managopal, and I went in the back, and I said, this is the neatest storage room I've seen in the entire Hare Krishna movement all around the world. So please keep it up, keep it up. Neatness. Prabhupada, I just turned on the lecture the other day. Prabhupada quoted that expression, cleanliness is next to godliness. And sometimes we forget that, but it also makes our minds more peaceful. So it's nice to come and see everything so neat and clean and looking good. And I think it's definitely the most beautiful carpet of anywhere in ISKCON. Most temples don't have carpet, but I guess with the cold winters in Pennsylvania, it helps to have that. So yeah, it's very nice to be here again. So I'll just read, actually I was going to, Maharaj ended with the 7th verse. I'm going to read the verse and then the purport. It's a very, very short purport there, and just add a couple comments and then we'll have some questions. So, again, Krishna says, therefore, Arjuna, building on what Maharaj has been speaking about how Arjuna said, how do we remember you? How do we attain you at the time of death? And then Krishna goes through this whole analysis of how it's important to remember him. And then he says, therefore, and I think this is the part that really kind of tells us, okay, so based on all of that, now what? Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time, carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me, your activities dedicated to me, and your mind, 2, and intelligence, 3, fixed on me, you'll attain me without doubt. So, dedicate our activities to him, focus our mind and our intelligence on him, he says we'll attain him without doubt. Short purport, Prabhupada says, this instruction to Arjuna is very important for all men engaged in material activities. The Lord does not say that one should give up his prescribed duties or engagements. One can continue them and at the same time think of Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna. This will free one from material contamination and engage the mind and intelligence in Krishna. By chanting Krishna's names, one will be transferred to the supreme planet, Krishna Loka, without a doubt. So here it's an interesting how Prabhupada is expanding on this and clarifying it, because we may think, okay, so what am I supposed to do in my situation? You know, Krishna says, Arjuna, you're a fighter, so go fight. So none of us, anybody here professional, any military people here? Okay, so the rest of us have different engagements. Some of us, we may be teachers, we may be business owners, we may be professional people, we have so many different types of engagements. So then what are we supposed to do in our situation? So Krishna's explaining, Prabhupada is expanding on this idea that whatever our situation is, we should continue that. You know, Maharaj is a wonderful example as a sannyasi, someone who's given up all of these material engagements, and he just serves Krishna, cent%, travels and teaches and preaches and inspires us all in Krishna consciousness. But most of us aren't able to do that, so what do? But we know in bhakti there are other yoga practices that if they're done correctly, they begin by renouncing the world. That's not taught so much these days by people that present those different schools or philosophies. But bhakti is always based on whatever your situation is, you can connect that and offer it to Krishna. So this is really such an important emphasis that Maharaj has brought to us by focusing on the 8th chapter, that whatever we do, we can perform our duty. We can go to college, we can go to the office, we can, be at home fixing the house or fixing automobiles if we're a mechanic or something like that. But we can do that, and at the same time, we can think of Krishna. We should think of Krishna. And Krishna's given some explanations throughout the Gita how we can think of him. The next couple verses coming up next is a whole list of ways he says we can meditate on him. But especially it's emphasized we should remember that he's our supreme friend, supreme enjoyer, and the supreme controller. If we remember these 3 things, and Prabhupada writes in that purport in the 6th chapter, this is the peace formula. We know the world is, everybody's talking about how can there be peace, and every time they talk about peace, the conflict increases more, Recently, I live in D.C., so I follow these things a little bit. One of the former presidents was saying that we used to worry about terrorism from outside the country, but now we have a bigger problem with terrorism and civil inside the country. So all the efforts towards peace and this and that is actually, it's worse. And we know, of course, there's very little internally people's peace of mind, and the rates of depression and different type of psychological pressures are just increasing more and more. So Krishna is saying this is the peace formula internally and externally. if we can learn to think of him. But what does that mean? To remember that he's the supreme friend, the supreme controller, and the supreme enjoyer. Because if we are understanding that he's the supreme friend, if we really understand that, Krishna's my very best friend. We all have friends. Some of us have best friends. And a best friend is somebody that has my interest in mind, isn't it? You know, like if you've got a best friend, you can call them up. It doesn't matter how bad things are going. They're there to back you up, to give you support, to give you encouragement. That's what it means, a best friend. You know, they're not fair weather friends, right? They're through thick and thin. So Krishna describes himself, and all the great acharyas, Vaishnava acharyas describe Krishna as the very best friend, which means if he's my best friend, if he gives advice, I can act according to that, and I'll be okay. So that helps us be more peaceful, because if I'm understanding, act according to Krishna's directions, then I know that this is actually the best thing for me. Why? Because my best friend suggested that. So thus, by remembering Krishna as our best friend, we become more peaceful. And then, if we're understanding that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer of everything, that also helps us become peaceful, because if we win, we offer to Krishna. If we lose, we offer to Krishna. If we get a raise, we offer to Krishna. If we get fired, we offer to Krishna. If we get praise, we offer to Krishna. We give him credit, as you were saying, Raja. Whatever I've achieved, it's only by his grace. And if something falls apart, we understand, well, okay, he's in control. He knows what's best for me, and there must be some good there. Yeah. And that helps one be peaceful. Whereas we can see a person that doesn't have this spiritual perspective. I mean, I remember my very first job, if the young people can imagine. I was making a lot of money compared to my friends in high school. In those days, some of my friends worked for Baskin and Robbins. They were paid $1 an hour. I remember that. And I was making big money because I worked in a ski shop. I was making $1.65 an hour. So I was doing good. But I remember going to the boss and asking for my first raise. It took a lot of courage to go ask him for my first raise. So I walked in. His name was Mr. Schwartz. Mr. Schwartz, you know, I've been working for 6 months. I was thinking I deserve a raise. And he said, sure, that makes sense. So we'll give you 25-cent raise. Anything else? And I was hoping for $2. So even though I got a 25-cent raise, I was like, oh, darn, I want a 35-cent raise. So in the same way, somebody gets a new house, they love their new house, it's really great, and they think it's wonderful, and then their friends invite them over to dinner, and they go, oh, you have a 3-car garage. I only have a 2-car garage, right? Or you get a promotion, right? And they walk in and they get a promotion. Yeah, you're moving upstairs, and they move upstairs and realize, but there's no window in this office, right? So you get what you think you want, but then the mind, the mind's not satisfied. But if we remember, actually, Krishna is the enjoyer of everything, and I'm offering whatever fruits I get to him. It's not about me compiling more and more things and bigger houses, that I'm offering everything to him. That actually helps us become peaceful. And through that peace of mind, that also helps us remember Krishna more. Yeah. Because then the mind's less disturbed. And the last point I'll make, just because of the time is short, that if we're also remembering that Krishna is the supreme person and the supreme source of knowledge, then when he gives us values to guide our lives, if we understand that's his position, then I'll take those values into my life, and that will have a tremendous impact. As described in one of the purports, we should act in a mode of goodness. So we know as Vaishnavas, Prabhupada gave us these four, what he describes, the pillars which support our regulator principles, but the pillars of religion: truthfulness, cleanliness, austerity, and mercy. So if we take those seriously, whether we're at school or we're at the office or we are whatever a particular profession might be or activities might be, if we're letting those guide us, because that's part of remembering Krishna. If I remember Krishna, it doesn't just mean, okay, I remember Krishna, forget what he says. Or I remember Krishna, but I forget his position. or I chant his names. Prabhupada's emphasizing chanting his names. It's not that I chant his names and I violate everything he asked me to do. But there's a very practical application too, which means, okay, I'm trying to remember Krishna. So what would Krishna do in this situation? Well, he told me to be truthful. He told me to be merciful. He told me to be a little austere, to make decisions based on spiritual principles. And he taught me to cleanliness, truthfulness, austerity, mercy. He taught me to be merciful. So that's part of what it means to be remembering Krishna. It means I remember his instructions so I face a particular situation. And a lot of times, I'm sure Maharaj hears this all the time too, people say, well, how am I supposed to be, I'm supposed to be Krishna conscious, but there's mean people in the office. And how the heck can you be Krishna conscious? Not everybody follows these rules. And I was thinking this story of Narada Muni, who had a wonderful history of disciples, very colorful disciple maker. One of his disciples was a snake. Remember the story in the first canto of the Bhagavatam? So one of his disciples was a snake who used to scare all the village people and this and that. So he became a Vaishnava. But then what was happening, Narada Muni came back to visit him, and he was very emaciated and, if I remember right, black and blue and bruised and quite miserable. So Narada told him, what's happening? He said, well, ever since I stopped, you told me I couldn't bite anyone anymore. And since I don't bite anybody anymore, then all the village boys, they're picking on me. And they're making my life miserable. So do you remember what Narada told him, Vishaka? Yes, I told you stop biting, but I never told you couldn't raise your hoods and look fearsome. So sometimes in life, that's also a very practical instruction. We shouldn't bite, but sometimes we have to be a little tough. So there's an example how Krishna consciousness can be applied in a very practical way. So thinking of Krishna, it doesn't just mean I come to the temple on Sunday and I think of Krishna, or I chant japa in the morning, or I do some puja at home, or read Bhagavad Gita at the end of the day. But it means thinking of Krishna means during the day, how do I apply Krishna's instructions at every moment, at every practical situation I face? What would Krishna want me to do now? What would Prabhupada want me to do now? And I'll end with one thing that I read. It ties in with Maharaj's comments earlier. I read in a book that Vishaka has in their home about millennials. I'm a long way from being a millennial, but the book said it's not just for millennials, it's for everybody. And he made one comment in there, and this book was quite wise. Because Maharaj is saying the goal of life isn't to become happy. The goal of life is to understand and awaken our love for Krishna. The spiritual happiness comes that way. It's not material happiness. So this man was saying, complete materialistic perspective, but he said, we need to train ourselves to understand the goal of life is not happiness, it's growth. And I thought, well, that makes sense. To learn, what do I learn through this situation? What am I growing? But then at the same time, growth means generally like growing to what? What am I growing to? Like if you've got a plant, you want to see the plant grow so that eventually produces fruits or flowers. There's some reason. It's not just grow to what? So in a similar way, I think our Vaishnava commentary on his point, yeah, it's not about temporary happiness, it's about growth, but growth towards spiritual awakening. So I just thought it interesting because, we talk about that, okay, some happiness comes, some distress comes. So what am I learning through this? How am I growing? How am I becoming a better devotee? So he was giving the same point. It's not about the temporary results, it's about long-term growth. But then we add the frosting on the cake, which is growth to what? So we have 6 minutes for some really dynamite questions. Technically, if we were in a temple that had what Prabhupada called installed deities, we would both be very strictly bound to that. But we know in this particular temple, the Sangha is the focus, and the deities come from people's homes. So I'm sure they would be happy to go home a little late so they can hear Maharaj speak a little bit more. So, okay. So in that case, we don't have 6 minutes for some really dynamite questions. We have all night for some really crummy questions. So go ahead and ask whatever you like. We're flexible here today.
It says that in hearing a lecture, two things should happen. This is the process of hearing. This is mentioned in Padma Purana. Two things. And of course there's 4 stages, but the final stage is that you should have questions, or you should get realizations as the persons were talking based on the knowledge that you said, and that gives you the understanding of what is being said. So we either have realizations that come by way of hearing, or if there is something that is not coming in that category, then there should be some questions that will help us come to realizations, because that's the understanding that's important, and not only just hearing it, but again understanding it deeper so we can see how we can apply it, or even realize it in our day-to-day service. So go for it. Okay, Parikshit Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept our humble obeisances, all glory to Srila Prabhupada. This is for either one of you, or maybe both of you, who could take turns answering this question. Quick and short, effective way to deal with a false ego. That's our question.
Quick and effective, huh? Wow. Whoa, how to deal with the false ego. There's 2 statements regarding the false ego. In one statement it says, getting rid of the false ego is just like picking a flower. And then there's another statement, getting rid of the false ego is like trying to stop an armored tank that's going in your direction. So you can choose which one you want to see as the means. So first you have to recognize that there is that element is there. And false ego means to act based on something that pertains to my benefit, either subtle or gross. When we act simply for the pleasure of the Lord, or for the pleasure of the devotees, if we act according to the instructions of the spiritual master, we're cutting away the false ego. If we try to, in other words, I'm coming to the temple to see the deities, but I'm also coming to the temple because I just got a new mask, and it's really nice. I want to show everybody my new mask, and because they will appreciate it, maybe they'll talk to me and they'll ask me where I got it from. In other words, we may come to the temple for some ulterior purpose. So that's the false ego dictating the motivation for coming to the temple. So that's just how we mix in this other person, which is about me, in our devotional life. So to recognize, Bhakti Tirtha Swami talks that in Beggar 4 a lot, how to recognize and how to deal with the false ego. But the hardest thing is to recognize it. Deal with it is a little easier, but recognizing it is hard. If you really want to recognize, that's one of the benefits of being married. That helps. If you want somebody to tell you a little bit about your false ego, you have that it's already available. It's called married life. And you can also, I remember one time I was with Bhakti Tirtha Swami in Chicago, and he was doing an exercise, and he was talking about, our certain qualities that we shouldn't be carrying in our devotional life, and he mentioned a few. And at the end he did an exercise, and it just blew everybody's mind. The exercise is that we had to go off in pairs, and then each person would ask his partner, what's wrong with me? Tell me what's wrong with me. And not everybody was so enthusiastic for the exercise. So, that's right to the point. But that's why association with devotees and being a little bit conscious in that association helps you to recognizing more of your false ego. When you're alone, it's just you and the false ego, and it seems like it's okay. So sadhu sangha helps to bring out the awareness of what the elements of that false ego is dictating to us. Trying to take credit in anything we do is part of the false ego. That's just a little bit. That's a big subject, but maybe I'm sure Anuttama Prabhu can expound nicely on that.
No, that's great. I think we should move on to the next question. I think that's really good. Very good response. You had a question, Phil? Hi, Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Nuttama Prabhuji, Hare Krishna, Chandramani Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Towards the end of the lecture, Nuttama Prabhu, you brought up the point of Narada Muni and how our life isn't so aimed towards happiness, but more so aims toward focusing our own self-growth. And within that self-growth, I feel comes growing pains. And Srila Prabhupada says, even when we're one step, we should pull ourselves up and try to aim towards that next step in spiritual life and move forward. And as we move forward in life with humility, how do we, focus on the different aspects of humility, like courage and strength, and not allow ourselves to become, naive in a way, or so persuaded by outside sources or negative, thoughts or things like that.
So the question was the final part. How to avoid being influenced by the negative on the outside. Well, Maharaj touched on, I think, probably the most important part. It was interesting. I never thought of that with Bart Maharaj. He was vulnerable for material consciousness to come in again because he was by himself.
Yeah.
I never thought of that. That was a very interesting point.
Yeah.
That he didn't have anybody there. Like you mentioned, marriage is a good example. To have somebody in our life, I know a little bit, I travel, sometimes you go someplace, oh Prabhu, can we do your laundry, can we make the bed, can we do this, can we do that? Then you go home, it's like, hey, the dirty laundry, it's your turn, it's Saturday. And, immediately whatever sense of false pride is brought back down to reality. So that's a big part of it, is associating with other devotees. It's so important because I have a story to tell. Remember when I was first coming to the temple years ago, and in Ann Arbor, I was a student, and went to a Sunday program, and it was just, everything was so blissful. I just felt wonderful. It was snowing. I lived in Michigan. I was walking home, and I remember I just felt I was like floating. And I can remember stopping and writing the word Krishna in the snow. And somehow or other, I just felt like, the sky had opened. It made so much sense, and everything else was so crazy. And they got home to not my apartment. I guess I was supposed to meet some friends afterwards. So I got to this place, and I remember opening the door and seeing two of my friends sitting in front of a stereo blasting, and they were just as college students often do, just sitting staring at the wall, listening to this music. And I can remember the physical experience of my consciousness going. I don't know if I've ever been happy enough to write the word Krishna in the snow ever since, But so, for me, it was a really graphic experience of how association is so important. And it's all positive, but in the positive sense of reminding us about Krishna, reminding us the purpose of life, reminding us that our desires for spiritual aspiration are not just me. I'm not a freak. You go out in the materialistic society, generally to have aspirations as we talk about, it's like a freak thing for a lot of people. It's like there's something wrong with you to be thinking like that. And it's almost like there's a small group of people, and it's not like only Hare Krishnas are like this. There's spiritual people in different paths that have some sense that there's something different. But without that association, it's you don't stand a chance. So I think that's the most important part, saying how do we maintain the humility, and how do we maintain the gravity, the kind of the focus on that. And the most important thing, Maharaj was emphasizing hearing and chanting, hearing from great saintly people, especially from Prabhupada, our founder Acharya, hearing from Krishna and all the great sages that are there. Their instructions are there in the Bhagavatam. And then associating with the devotees. And as Maharaj was saying with Pariksha questions, it helps shave off the rough edges and at the same time gives us strength to go on in our Krishna consciousness. Because we are like that, like Bharat Maharaj, such an example. I mean, he was on the level of prema, which is way beyond what we can even imagine. But still, because he lost association with devotees by the power of the material energy. So...
And it seemed like it was okay, to show affection for another living entity that was in need. So he kind of justified that. So his soft-heartedness was nice, but it shouldn't have replaced his, spiritual practice. That was a mistake. Yeah.
That was a good point. It was like the intention was okay, helping another living entity was okay, but it's like, hey, you're getting carried away here.
Right.
What's the goal, right? I mean, there's this classic story of the two sadhus that were, walking, and some elderly woman said, I need help, I can't cross the river. And the one sadhu said, okay, get on my back, and he carried her across the river, set her down, they continued on the way, and then the one friend said to the other, 3 hours later, I can't believe you carried that woman across the river. You know the story? Yeah. And his response, I carried her for 3 minutes, you've carried her for 3 hours. So what are we associating with? So the one person, okay, I had to deal with something, compassion, this and that, acting according to some worldly duties, but I did it because it was the right thing to do, and then I went on beyond it. And the other person's just not giving it up. So that's very important.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same thing.
So do your duty. Try to act, as Prabhupada said, act in the mode of goodness. Do it for Krishna. Remember Krishna. And always associate with devotees to protect us from any kind of confusion.
And that's the summation of everything. If we're thinking of how to do our duty or serve Krishna, and then happiness will come automatically. You don't have to think about, well, am I going to do this and it's going to make me happy or not? Or am I becoming happy because I'm doing this? That shouldn't be a consideration. The activity itself is what we focus on, and not so much the feelings that we're getting or not getting. To put it simple, absorb yourself in the activity. Make that the focus, and not, what am I getting or how am I feeling, or am I actually, benefiting from this. The activity itself, because it's authorized, because it's coming from the acharyas, then that's all we need to know. Therefore we're going to absorb ourselves as a service. And we do it as a service, then that's perfect.
Prabhupada writes in a purport in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, if one works in a factory and is meditating, then I'm offering this work to Krishna, he'll become a pure devotee. Our president has a question or comment?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Two questions, but one is on behalf of Dear Krishna. He's on the altar at the Pujari room. And it's a very nice question. We have many youths amongst us here, and some of them are in high school, some are going up to college. And just relating this question to Chandramali Swami when he spoke about the student who went to medical school and got so absorbed. How can we as parents advise our youth to not get so trapped in big plans and get sidetracked, and get attached to what's happening there? Because once they go up to college, they have more of the non-devotee association and less of the devotee association. And sometimes, as some parents will be pushing, get a great, get a GPA 4.0, but then what about the Krishna consciousness? How can we help the future generation in that?
I'll say something very brief and let Maharaj say the bulk of it. For Indian parents, it's very easy. On Sunday, you only give them 5 days of frozen prasadam. So they have to come home on Saturday to get something else to eat, and that way they get your association. That's the secret of many Indian families I've seen. Never give them more than 5 days. So every single weekend they have to come home and get their mom's cooking. While they're there, you bombard them with Krishna consciousness, and they'll make it through the next week. That's one way.
That sutra is enough to answer the question. What I'm going to say is not as exciting as that. Maybe not as complete.
Pritchett wanted clear and simple, so I was just trying to pick up that mood.
Well, I can be simple, but I don't know how clear it's going to go across. I was just thinking to help them, try to give them the higher taste of Krishna consciousness. And if you try to dissuade them from the other side, it becomes impossible. Because it seems, they're going to do that, and that's their focus. But if they get a higher taste, and then somehow or other you have to track them to get that higher taste. By, bringing them into the association of devotees. One thing I know the youth like is they learn how to like to hunt and play mridanga. So when they all come together to do kirtan, and their friends are doing it, so bring them into that association, play mridanga, have kirtan. So we've seen a lot of the youth in our society become more and more Krishna consciousness through, following their peers who are Krishna conscious devotees. How to bring them into that association.
I would just add a really important thing is that parents have to set a good example. If you're into it, then the kids are going to see that. They learn more by your example than they do by what you say. In fact, they might even rebel against what you say if it's different from what they're doing. That's one thing. And that it starts really early. You can't expect to not set a nice example until your kid's 18, and then you say, okay, get serious in your spiritual life. But it's like, well, gee, Dad, what did you do for so many years? They're going to notice that. And then I was just reading the other day some of Prabhupada's references about Gurukula, or raising children. Prabhupada was mentioning, he said, children have a playful nature, therefore they should make sure they have fun in serving Krishna. So sometimes, we spoke for 40 minutes about it's not about seeking happiness because it comes from within, etc. That's not artificial. That's like a philosophical commitment, and then it becomes a spiritual taste. And sometimes it's like, okay, I don't have this realized, but I'm going to force it on my kids. So it's not about being happy. You just, I remember being in a temple one time and watching some lady walk in with her 7-year-old son to a Sunday program and said, sit down and be quiet. And I was thinking, that's going to last about 6 years, and when he hits or she hits 13, it's all over. Because they're going to say, I'm not going to the temple. Why should I go to the temple? Just to sit down and shut up? I don't want to do that. So, that's very important to make sure that spiritual life has to be a pleasant and an inspiring activity. And just like the other day, I was kind of pleased. I have 3 grandchildren, and was over at my son's house, and they were discussing how their kids, are they old enough are they going to trust them as teenagers to drive to Alachua for the 24-hour kirtan? I was thinking, this is really like a Krishna conscious expression, because every part of the ritual of kids reach a certain age, do I trust them with the car? Do I trust them with their friends? Do I trust them away for a long trip? But what were these kids doing? They were taking a long trip to go to Alachua for the 24-hour kirtan. I think this is like perfect parent-child tension, because Krishna's right in the middle of it. I think that's what it's all about, being Krishnaized, to help the kids find something that they want to do. And they're going to express it differently. I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah.
Anytime, I missed Maharaj's chanting in the parade, but I know, when I chant, people come up and go, every time they say, that was an old tune. The young people, they're going to sing, they got different tunes. They got, they know drum beats I never saw before. But they're serving Krishna in their way.
I did a more modern tune, so
I'm glad I missed it, or else my false ego would have given me some trouble. Yeah. So, there was a second question?
You've answered it within your question. Thank you so much.
Okay. What do the young people say? Help us, okay? Tell Maharaj and I, and then your parents will hear like vicariously. Is that the right term? What would you say? Some of the young people here. How would you like to see the older generation understand how to facilitate your Krishna consciousness?
Don't be shy.
Yeah, and talk to Maharaj and I so we can use it next time we get asked a similar question.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hare
You
Krishna.
got stuck with the mic, go for it.
Could you repeat the question just one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, well, I think the idea is, okay, parents worry, Krishna conscious parents worry about how can we give our children, space, freedom to grow and explore who they are and all that, and at the same time be Krishna conscious and not get caught up in materialistic ways. So our responses were, recognize their individuality and, set a nice example and make Krishna conscious a happy experience for them. Tell us how else we should answer that question.
So personally, I feel like there's like a certain age where you have to become like independent. Like my parents, like for me, like Krishna consciousness was there from like a young age. So I kind of grew up with those morals and ideals that like Krishna's in the center, and I still luckily have those ideals. But like I feel like as you grow older, like you become a little bit more independent, and it becomes like out of the way, I guess. Like you have to balance your life more between school and Krishna consciousness. So it's like where we seek opportunities to have more association. I feel like association becomes a big part as you get older, because that's what at least for me, association is what keeps me in part in Krishna consciousness. So like Rati Yatras and these Kirtan festivals and everything, those are what I feel like keep me more intact with Krishna consciousness. So those are what are the main things that I look forward to, and I think those are what keep me forward. So I guess like as you become older, like independence becomes a thing, and you want to spend more time with like devotees. So it's more of like hanging out with devotee friends and devotee association, doing kirtan. So that's what I think personally.
Great. Any of the Vaishnavis, younger ones, like to comment?
Hare Krishna. Do I answer the same question?
Repeat the question. Yes, please.
No,
Can you?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think what keeps me in Krishna consciousness is also, like probably also association, because that's what, like that's also a reason why school is so much more interesting, because your friends are gonna be there, so you know that you can talk to them during the day, and that's what like lifts your mood. So that's like how it is with Krishna consciousness. You have devotee friends, which also increases your like service for Krishna, and keeps you like in line. And you can use your devotee friends as an example to see what they're doing in devotional service. You can use that, like they could be your example, and that could help you progress in your bhakti. Yeah.
That's very good. So they both emphasize association, having friends that are devotees, doing fun things you like to do for Krishna with your peers. Thank you. That's good. One more, you think?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Hare Krishna Maharaj. I've been having this question since like afternoon. I've been meditating on this question, and it's regarding tolerance.
What's the word?
Regarding tolerance.
Tolerance. Okay.
Yeah. So
You've been tolerating this question for a long time. Yes?
in a way.
Okay.
So
So you're halfway there already. You've already learned how to tolerate.
So, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Shikshashtakam also talks about tolerance, and other Vaishnava literatures also heavily emphasize how humility and tolerance is required for spiritual progress. But my question is more so in the material setting, how do we know when to tolerate, when to pull back our punches, or when to like stand up and defend for ourselves? More so when you're in a power relationship and you're the subordinate. And in some sense, during the lecture itself, you answered when you gave the example of Narad Muni and the snake. But if you could like more elaborate on that, in practical settings, when do you tolerate a situation, when do you stand up? So.
Well, I'll give you just a few words, but then again it requires explanation, and that requires some intelligence to see the situation, and to have the understanding that you want to see how you can benefit from this situation, or you can learn from it in some way or another. And these situations that come in our life are opportunities to gain either knowledge of Krishna conscious practice or some of the qualities that we can develop, or it can be the knowledge that helps us become a little bit detached from material life. The situation can help us bring about a sense of detachment that forces us to tolerate. Or it can be an opportunity to speak something that will benefit another person. So there's different results that can come by way of tolerance depending on the situation. But there is two kinds of tolerances which are mentioned in the scriptures. And Krishna says, Marta sparsas tukonti atsitnosna sukadukada adapayino nityas tamstitiksava bharata, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course of time are like the appearance and disappearance of the winter and summer seasons. One should learn to tolerate these things without becoming disturbed. So these are the tolerances that come by way of naturally living in this material world, having a material body. But then again, situations come up that are not, expected. And then Krishna also explains in another part, or actually not Krishna, it says Lord Brahma, he says, Tate nukampa shusha mikshamanam bhujana eva kripa vipakam vedvava hubir vedadana maste jiveti yo mukti padesha dayava. That kind of tolerance that Krishna throws at you in order to help you become more attached to him. And that is seen as a great opportunity for spiritual advancement. In the last line it says that one who accepts these difficult situations as coming orchestrated by the Lord, prays to the Lord, thanks the Lord, and says, actually I deserve much more, but you're just minimizing the effects of my sinful activities by giving me a little bit of a difficulty. Therefore, I offer my obeisances to you. And then the last line says, one who prays like that, mukti padesha dayabhak, the kingdom of God is their rightful inheritance. In other words, they're guaranteed. They have moved in that direction, and where if they continue to live in that mood, they can go back home, back to Godhead, and seeing everything as Krishna's mercy. And then again, you have to analyze the situation and see how to respond or not respond. And that takes a little bit of thoughtfulness and maybe a little bit of scriptural knowledge to see. But in general, tolerance is a very important quality that allows us to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and Lord Chaitanya talks about that as the basic principle of chanting continuously is learning how to tolerate. And he uses a very extreme example, the tolerance of a tree, using that as the epitome for what tolerance it actually is, that despite whatever happens to the tree remains tolerant. So I think, I'm sure I'm going to expand in some practical understanding of this point, but in a general sense, we have to see the situation and try to understand how to respond or not respond. But we shouldn't be disturbed by the situation, that's the thing. And the natural response is to become disturbed. But try to go beyond that and see that there's something in here that I can learn from, I can gain from, I can benefit from. And that takes you to the next step, to see how you can gain or learn.
Yeah, it was an excellent answer by Marsh. I would just add one thought. You quoted Lord Chaitanya who taught tolerance. Do you remember an incident where Lord Chaitanya gave up his tolerance? Yeah. So, with Jagai and Madai.
Oh, okay.
So, he said we should be tolerant, but it doesn't mean that we tolerate offenses and harm to others. That's very important. I mean, you look at Bhagavad Gita, right? It's in a battlefield, and I've been listening lately to the audio version of Dharma, Krishna Dharma's Mahabharata, and it's amazing how the Pandavas, with Yudhishthira leading them, tolerated again and again and again and again and again and again, and even Krishna went, and said, "Look, let's have peace," and they tried to kidnap Krishna. And even after that, Yudhishthira was saying, "Do we really have to fight? Isn't there another way out of this?"
Bhima was crying, thinking what the Pandavas had to go through.
Yes.
Bhishma Dev, yeah.
So that example of tolerance is there, but we have the very clear example. There's great examples with Prabhupada. Prabhupada was at one of the early pandals in India on a big stage. I can't remember, it was probably Mumbai, but maybe it could be Mumbai, Delhi, there was quite a few. And the first night, the devotees just got very spontaneously happy and ecstatic and were jumping off the stage and having kirtan with the people down below. And the next night, there was one of the organizers who thought, hey, now on cue, it's time for you to jump down. So he went up to the stage and he was kind of grabbing at the devotees, and I think even the ladies, Vaishnavis, trying to pull him off the stage, let's get the party going. And Prabhupada saw that happening, he jumped off the Vyasasana and went to hit the guy with his kartals.
Yeah, he was abusing the ladies, he was.
Yeah, the ladies in particular.
Yeah.
It's like, he's up there speaking about, peace of mind and chanting Hare Krishna. But when that happened, forget it. He's crossed the line. So I think that's a very important part of it too, is to think, am I tolerating me? I've been offended, I haven't been recognized, I haven't been honored.
Right.
The mosquitoes biting me versus, the alligators coming to get somebody else. It's like, okay, I'm not going to tolerate. So I think that's a piece of it. The tolerating offenses and harm to others. That's a different line. But then we have to be careful. Dhruva went to avenge the death of his brother. He's like, I'm not going to tolerate this because you killed my brother and I'm a Chatra, I have to avenge him. But then he lost control. He got too wrapped up in trying to even the score, and then he had, was it Manu or Lord Brahma came and spoke to him and said, hey, stop, you're waiting.
Yeah, it was Kuvera, who was Kuvera, who was the father of the Yakshas. And then Brahma too, also both.
So, like Mark said in the beginning, we have to be a little wise and apply it. But those are some basic rule: be tolerant. Basic rule: if others are being harmed, don't be tolerant. It doesn't mean you go out and harm the other person, but at least you can stop the violence against them.
Another part is that if someone is speaking something that is against Shastra and it's making a point of that, we shouldn't tolerate that and think, oh, well, he's entitled to his opinion. And we have to maybe in a very gentlemanly way say that, this is wrong by pointing out what is actually right. So we don't tolerate just people speaking and saying this is, Krishna consciousness or something that's authorized. That's another kind of intolerance that is Krishna conscious. Yeah.
Okay. What's next? We're supposed to be chanting, dancing, and feasting, so which part comes next? Very good.
was an hour and 35 minutes.
Hare Krishna.
That's pretty long.
Throw us out, yeah.
I'm surprised that we went there. I lead? Okay. Come on up. Come up a little closer, at least a little closer. There you go. Okay. Namaho Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sinyavadi Evastyatyarisa Arine Prabhupada. He Vajaya Jaya He Gaura Chande Arutike Sohari Jaya Jaya Gaura Chande Aharotike Sohubha Hari Chantabhani Jagyamanaloga Chandrakini Tahitan Bhamegadara Nikatea Dvaitasini Evasajatra Dharani Bhosi Achi Gaurashan Ratna Simha Hari Rahatmasina Arotiko Rehina Brahma Adhideva Adhideva Brahma Bhaje Nara Hari Kori Chamaradu Hari Kori Hey, Sanjayamu Kunda Vasi Eko Sari Gaya Vasu Bhaje Kantu Bhaje Bhaji Kara Tara Bhaje Hey Madhu Ram here Janga Bhaje Hey Bharam Tara Bhaje Sankha Bhaje Gantha Bhaje Madhu 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 Bhaje Madhu Sankha Bhaje Gantha Bhaje Madhu 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 Bhaje Sankha Bhaje Gantha Bhaje Madhu 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 Bhaje Madhu Hari Bham Hari Bham Hari Bham Hari Bham Hey Nitai Gaur Hari Bham Hari Bham Hari Bham Nitai Gaur Hari Bham Kiva Bahu Koti Chandra Dhini Badana Kalajay Vanya Mam Kore Java Shiva Sukha Jara Preme Jaja Up Bhata Divi No Dhati Hota Sampaya Kiva Jaya Jaya Gaura Chande Aruti Ke Soba Gaura Chande Aruti Ke Soba Jaya Jaya Gaura Chande Aruti Ke Soba Hari Kanchavani Jagdamani Bhavam Hey, hey, Gaurangaya Oti Sobha Jagadhanam Manalova Gaurangaya Oti Sobha Jagadhanam Manalova Gaurangaya Oti Sobha Jagadhanam Manalova Patita Pavana Gaurahari Bhaja 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 Bhari Patita Pavana Gaurahari Bhaja 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 Bhari Hey Krishna Chaitanya Nitai Bhaja 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 Bhari Hey Krishna Chaitanya Nitai Bhaja 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 Bhari Hari Bham Hari Bham Hari Bham Nitai Gaur Hari Bham Hari Bham Gaur Hari Bham Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nitya Nanda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Chaitanya Nitya Nanda Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nitya Nanda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Chaitanya Nityananda Gadadhar Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nitya Nanda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Nityananda Gaur Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, evil. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Oh. Hey! Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Vivo. Hey! Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Oh, oh, Krishna Krishna, Hare oh, Gauranga. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Gauranga. Hey. Hey. Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Chant dance, chant dance, chant dance. Hey! Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Rama. Chant that. Dance chant. Hey! Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Rama. Chant that, chant that. Help me. Hey! Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Gauranga, Gauranga. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Oh! Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Gauranga, Gauranga. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Chant that, chant that. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Chant dance. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai Jagannath. Hare Hare Nama Krishna Yadavaya Nama Hare 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 Nama Krishna Yadavaya Nama Hare Yadavaya Madhavaya Kesavaya Namaha Yadavaya Madhavaya Kesavaya Namaha Gopal Govinda Ram Shimadu Sudhan Gopal Govinda Ram Shimadu Sudhan Giridhari Gopinath Madhura Mohan Giridhari Gopinath Madhura Mohan Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Sita Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rup Sanatan Vataragunathan Shri Rup Sanatan Vataragunathan Shri Jiva Gopalavata Dasaragunatha Shri Jiva Gopalavata Dasaragunatha Hey! Hey Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Hare Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Hare Yadavaya Madhavaya Kesavaya Namaha Hare Yadavaya Madhavaya Kesavaya Namaha Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare. Oh, hey, Gauranga. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram. Whoa, Gauranga. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Gauranga. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur.
Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama.
Viva! Gauranga! Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya. Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya. Radha Ramana Hare Govinda Jaya Jaya. Radha Ramana Hare Govinda Jaya Jaya. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram.
Krishna, Krishna, Nitai Gaur. Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, oh Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna Krishna. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Gaur Premanande. Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Privrajagacharya. Hasto Tarasata Shri Shriman. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Privrajagacharya. Hasto Tarasata Shri Shriman. His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrindi Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Premji Goho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivastri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopal Gopinath Shaima Kunda Radha Kundi Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Gangamaya Ki Jai. Jumunamaya Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Jaga Ki Jai. Brihat Madanga Ki Jai. Shri Shri Gauri Nitai Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Shri Baladev Shrimati Subhadra Ki Jai. Shri Shri Nishingane Bhagavan Ki Jai. Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Harrisburg ISKCON Yatra Ki Jai. Vaishnav Sangha Ki Jai. Gaura Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, Shri Shri Guru and Garanga Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Narada Shingaya Prahlada Dayane Hiranyakashi Purvakshaya Shila Tangana Karaine Ito Nishinga Barato Nishinga Yato Yato Yamita To Nishinga Bahen Nishinga Idrayan Nishinga Bayan Nishinga Indrayan Nishinga Basinga Madim Sharanam Prapade Tavakara Kamala Varena Kama Bhuta Singam Dalita Hiranyakachiputa Nubringam Kesavadvita Naradirupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Tavakara Kamara Purena Kama Bhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakachiputa Nubringam Kesavadvita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Tavakara Kamala Varena Kama Bhuta Shingam Dalita Hiranyakachiputa Nubringam Kesavadvita Naradirupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Bala Tavakara Kamala Varena Kama Bhuta Shingam Dalita Hiranyakachiputa Nubringam Kesavadvita Naradirupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Nrsimhade, Jaya Nrsimhade, Jaya Nrsimhade, Jaya Nrsimhade. Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj. Jayo Narahari, 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 Jayo Narahari. Jayo Prabhupada, Jayo Prabhupada, Jayo Prabhupada, Jayo Prabhupada. Nitai Gora Hariva, 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 Gora Hariva. Nitai Gora Hariva, 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 Gora Hariva. Nrsimhane Bhagavan Ki, Prahlad Maharaj Ki, Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, for being here with us, for blessing us with the association, the rocking kirtan. I have not seen Mandeep dance. It was so nice to see Mandeep dance. So if Mandeep danced, this was a powerful kirtan. Thank you so much. And I want to thank again, my heart, it's so touched just to have both of you, and I pray that we get more and more of Chandramali Swami's presence and visits. Visits more often so that we can get more inspired, more fired up, more dances, and more workouts so we can just forget the gym. Forget the money, right? This is just enough. Thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki! I'm not going to make a long announcement because I know that we have worked up a sweat. Thanks to Chandramali Swami to give us a free gym workout. And I know we're all hungry, but I want to really thank all of you for coming and being part of this wonderful session. And just one quick announcement is we have next Saturday, the Silver Spring Fall Fest. We have the Harinam team and the book distribution team will be able to do book distribution from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Please do, Nishit is not here, but Nitya Gopal and Prasad and Jitmitra Prabhus are here. If we can all work together, and the youth, whoever is on the Harinam team, please support them. Yes, we will give you prasadam. You will not go hungry, I can promise you that. So let's have a wonderful 5 hours of book distribution and chanting the holy name, because once people hear the holy name, they're going to follow the tune and the musical notes in the air and come straight to our table. Do I have a go on that? Yes, perfect. Just got to see the musical notes and then they'll come to our table. So let's be present next Saturday. And our Kartik Kirtan Fest is coming up on October 23rd, Saturday. And the youth have won the game. They wanted 8 hours. They got the 8 hours. And they're working on getting kirtanias from out of town. So please, let's come out and support everyone. Let's just absorb in the holy name and propagate the holy name, and so that we can really taste Lord Krishna dancing on our tongue. Thank you so much. Oh, and Govind, I just remembered that today is Govind's birthday. So if he's not little anymore, but the one in the Jagannath t-shirt, if we all can offer our blessings to him. It's so nice that he came to the temple on his birthday. So happy birthday, Govinda. Thank you so much. Prem, you would like to say something? Please.
Just a short announcement. Maharaj brought some books that he wrote, Forbidden Voices. It's beautiful stories how people were transformed by Krishna consciousness, especially in the prisons. So I have only 4 left. So if somebody wants, they can approach me, and who comes first gets it. So,
Thank you. And I have just to say that these are wonderful books for us to read. Sometimes we wonder how we can change and do prison ministry. If you read Chandramani Swami's books, we get all the answers. We don't have to go and see any counselor and psychologist. We got answers in Chandramani Swami's books. So we have 4 copies. I got one. We have 2 more copies. I know it's going to be gone.
So if not, I'll give all the balance 3, Prabhu. I'll find a way to give it for sure. Thank you so much. And it's prasadam time. You save the best for last. We're all hungry. Thank you so much. Oh yes, of course. And before you leave, please do see the deities, and then we can have a rocking kirtan. Sorry. Prasadam ki jai. Haribol. And it's boxed. Yes, it's downstairs. So it'll be ready. It's all boxed, and please enjoy it. Haribol.